Okay, so in this problem, the switch up is this word VIG, or letters VIG. And it changes how we set up our formula just slightly. Normally, in the quiz yesterday, we would take an annual percentage rate, or an annual yield, let's say 6%. And we say, hey, we're going to spread that 6% out, compound it monthly, right? Which essentially divvies it up. Like we normally would take 0.06 and divide by 12, right? And that's not what's happening anymore. Instead, we're taking this 12% per week, which if we were to actually multiply it all out, ends up being essentially over 600% in a year. Now, if that sounds crazy, that's because it is. If you were to go to a payday lending type spot, the interest is outrageous because they're willing to give you money when? Now, instantly, right? But you will pay for it. So we're about to look at how much am I going to pay for it. So they compound, they give you an interest rate that is actually tacked on per week, compounded weekly. So let's talk about how that changes. Obviously, if I'm trying to figure out how long it takes, how am I going to start to set up this formula from yesterday?
You mean tacked on by like on top of regular interest rates or something?
No. Oh. But you'll see what I mean in a second. Okay. How do I start? Go ahead, Jesse.
I don't know if this makes sense. Well, I just said like 5,000.
Good.
1,000.
Yep.
1,000.
I set my actual final amount, right?
Yes. And
Yep.
You know, 1,000. Well, I did 1,000 times 1 plus point. Is it one? Is it a weird? Is it okay? So 1 minus.
What is this a present value or future value?
Future.
Oh, no. That's
present
it.
value.
Present value. Why? Why is it a present value? It's a loan, right? When are you getting the money? Now, right? So this is 1 minus
1 plus 0.12.
That's it. There's no dividing, nothing. Why? Because it's a per week compound, or it's a per week interest rate, compounded weekly. This is to the negative t all over 0.12. The only small change, this isn't a huge deal, we don't emphasize this a lot in here, so I don't want to stress it too much, but the only change is that we're not dividing that interest rate. Does that help? Okay. All right, so real quickly, solve that. I want an actual answer, please. In a second, I'm going to have you tell me what my steps are in my calculator.
Wait, is this just because it's weekly we're not doing that?
Correct.
Like if it was monthly, we would say...
If it was an annual percentage rate compounded less than annual, you know how if I said, hey, annual interest rate compounded annually, you wouldn't divide it, right?
Oh, so it's the like compounding and the like amount of time you invest is the same as you don't use.
Correct. Compared to the interest rate. So if the interest rate is a yearly interest rate compounded monthly, you divide. But if it was an annual interest rate compounded annually, you divide by nothing, right? This is a weekly interest rate compounded weekly, you divide by nothing. Okay, do the best you can.
I just realized that this is
Really?
I like, you know, when you have the 1 and you're supposed to subtract it when you're finding time.
Yeah.
I actually added it.
Oh, that shouldn't throw it off too much, like points-wise. Did you show all your steps?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask you to show me the actual calculator steps here in a second. If you've got them, raise your hand. Okay, so this answer is between what two numbers? 8 and 9. Okay, here we go. Mathematically, what am I doing? Tell me what type of my calculator. 5,000 divided by 1,000. Then, yeah, times 0.12 is usually the next best step. Then what? Minus 1. Whoops. Then, yeah, I divide, but yeah, divide by -1. Okay, now what? Yes, very good. Take the log of both sides. My base is 1.12, and then this is, I can either drop this in, or in this case, it's easy enough, I can just type it. Last step is 2, technically. Divide by -1. So my answer here for the amount of time is 8.08. Now, what that should prepare you for is this. How how many payments of $1,000 do I make? 8. But will that be enough? No. Now, if you remember, a bunch of people asked this question yesterday, which was a super valid question. How do I round? Right? How many people asked that question at some point yesterday? Like, do I round up or down? Right? And I just basically said, don't worry about it today because we're talking about it now. The question is, would you have to pay a 9th payment of $1,000? No. But are they going to make you pay what's left over? You bet. So we got to figure out how to find that. So yesterday, we started the process, and this is what you're going to finish right now. Yesterday, we started the process of recursively understanding what a bank ledger is going to read for your balance, because they're going to keep track of what happens every week. So, what should be in front of you is that my initial balance is how much? 5,000. We did 3 of these, right? So, we're going to talk through 3. You're going to finish the rest. It'll take you 3 minutes. After the first week, tell me what the bank does. Now listen, because this matters. They tack on your interest. Then what? Okay. Now, this leaves me with 4,600. What does the bank then do at the end of the second week? Yeah, they tack on that interest again. You make your payment. How much is it? 4,152. Okay. Now, we showed a third one, right? Will you do me a favor? I need you to get all the way down until you pay this off. So you can either squeeze it in, you can write it on another sheet of paper. I don't care. You can go up to the top if you want. Either way, how many more lines do you need? Because we did up to 3 yesterday. Yeah, you're going to need 5 more lines, right? You're going to need to get to your 8th line. So I want you to practice this because it's going to help. I'm not going to ask you to do this repetitive process that many times. I'm going to do it probably 3 times total. Okay?
So why do you subtract off 1,000 each time?
Because in the problem, you committed to paying $1,000 per week. It's sort of like.
So this is your own balance.
Yeah. Yeah. So in this case, but payday lending is giving you the money.
Okay.
So they're going to keep track of how much you paid after they attack on the interest every week. I equate it to something like some sort of emergency situation. You get in a car accident and you have to fix your car, but you don't have any savings. But you do, on the other hand, have a good job, right? So they give you the money to pay and get your car back, but you have enough money to pay $1,000 per week. Okay? Okay, so you are, is everyone clear what you're doing, or anyone need help one-on-one? No. We like it.
This is just blasting me. Blistering hot back.
How about if you change seats, because it's lovely out.
And I'm just gonna shine like every couple seconds I just got a reflection on the couch.
Okay, well, how about if you change seats?
I like this.
Those are your options. Okay, so in a minute, I'm going to show you what your lines should look like to double check. That was when Liam asked that, when I said, because you're posting interest per week and it's compounded weekly, that's why you're not dividing. It's the same idea as if you were charged an annual interest, but it only compounded annually. You also wouldn't have to divide. Okay, so will you pop your hand up if you are all done? Okay, let me give you about 30 more seconds, and then I'm going to have you check these lines. So just as a heads up, on Tuesday, I will give you an answer key to worksheet 8. I'm not giving it to you now because I think there are going to be some things you need to go in and tweak after today. But making sure these lines are correct is going to be super important. So hang on. Oh, it is 17, actually. Okay, so check these if you would, please. Here's one of the ways to quickly check is to just double check the balance. Here's week 4, black is week 5, red is week 6. Black is week 7, and green is week 8. Now, at the end of week 8, your balance reads $80.12. So, at the end of week 8, have you paid off the loan? No, so you better believe, what are they going to do? They're going to tack on interest. So add that. It essentially becomes your week 9 payment. Your week 9 payment is certainly not $1,000. All you owe is $89.73. But they are going to charge you interest for having left over that $80.12. If I wanted to total up, so think this even goes back to your quiz yesterday too. If I wanted to total up how much I had paid over the course of the loan, what would you tell me? $8,000 and $8,000, I should say, $89.73. Why? Because it's 8 payments of what? Of $1,000 and then a final payment. Now, really quickly, side comment, if I wanted to then discuss the interest on the loan, how much interest did I pay? Yeah, $3,089.73. Why? Yeah, I take my full amount minus what my actual loan amount was for. Okay, if you're generally with me, raise your hand. All right, so what I want to now mention is this allows you, for those of you who weren't totally sure about Worksheet 8, should go in and fill in some of the gaps. But now I'm going to fill in the remaining gaps. To do that, we're going to start to talk about part 4 of your mortgage project, which is going to require an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheet. Most people do Google Sheets. I don't care what you choose. But either way, you're going to need to open up your laptops and start. I'm going to teach you how to set this whole thing up. You're going to be super tempted to do something socially with whatever way you want to try to do something socially. Do me a favor and not do that. Stay super focused on this spreadsheet. This is the beginning of the last new content. So I think it was Cindy, you just said how many parts are there. We've essentially finished part 5, but now we're going to move into the beginning of part 6, and we'll finish up 5 and 6 on Tuesday. Now, a couple things, just because I don't think. What do you need? Do what you can about that. Do what you can about that. I'm going to actually start from scratch on my spreadsheet. I have one already done, but I just want to show you some tips that I think are helpful. Here's tip number 1. See how many cells this is? It's obnoxious. So I'm going to use about 5 columns, so I'm going to highlight those. And I'm going to widen those 5 out. Did you highlight them already? Okay, when you see the cursor guy, when he goes, see how he changes? Okay, when he goes up there and you grab one of the bars, it'll change the width of all 5. I'm going to do the exact same thing rows-wise. We're going to use about 10 rows. And I'm going to grab that width as well. It just will really quickly clean up what you can see.
How do you get from
Say again? Now, I'm going to teach you several different ways to go about these spreadsheets. You may do what makes the most sense to you. I'm going to show you what I think makes the most sense for this problem so far, which is that we have a setup in which we consider the week we are in. We are then going to make a payment, and at the end of the week, we will have a balance. Yeah, and you are going to want to typically label your columns. If you're really good at spreadsheets, there's actually a way to hold on to those titles while you move the spreadsheet up and down. Yeah. I did type it in where he is. Okay, so here's another tip. Besides, once you label your columns, I know that this scenario requires how many weeks? Yeah, 9 payments, but 8 weeks, right? So what's going to happen, I need you to have your eyes up here, please. The first thing you always want to do is establish the initial balance, which in this case is, and in every case, is going to start with week or month or payment 0. So my 0th week has a balance of $5,000. But I know it could be easy in this case to just crank out 0 through 9. However, I want to show you a trick, because if you think at all you might get ahead in the project this weekend, you're not going to type in 360, which for a 30-year loan is how many rows you would need here. So if you highlight these 3 cells, the spreadsheet reads the pattern. It reads it as 0, 1, 2, and it is going to fill in the rest. So if I take the cursor guy and put him in the bottom right-hand corner right here, and then pull it down, it will fill in the gaps. It will literally continue the pattern. You see how that works? So you're going to need, we know we're going to need 9 payments, right? You want me to do that again? Okay. So I highlight, I believe you have to highlight 3. You might be able to do it with 2, but I think it's a little more dangerous. So I'm going to highlight 3 to have it read the pattern, the linear pattern in this case. I take the cursor guy, I pull him to the bottom right-hand corner, and then I'm going to pull it all the way down so that I get enough. Yes, and when you have a 30-year loan, which is 360 payments, you for sure do not want to do that. Okay? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is talk about the next column. After I have my initial balance, I start making payments. But that payment for this scenario, not every scenario, but for this scenario is the same. So I only have to type one of those, and then I do a similar set of steps. I take the cursor guy, I put him in the bottom right-hand corner, and I drag. Anyone need me to do that again? Yeah, it doesn't hurt anything to, yeah. Okay, now, to get the balance at the end of week 1, just say out loud with words, what do I have to do to get the balance? Multiply what? The previous balance by the interest and then subtract the payment. Okay, so when we want the spreadsheet to read cells, we hit equals. We want it to reference the previous balance. I just touched that cell, which is now referencing, if you notice, see this bar up at the top? It's saying, hey, oh, okay, we're going to do equal C2. Now it's here too, but you can always see it up here in that bar as well, which sometimes is super helpful. Now, you told me we're going to tack on the interest. In the world of spreadsheets, it has to read multiplication as the asterisk. And we're going to tack on 1.12. Now, I'm going to teach it this way because it's going to be helpful in the project. We're going to then subtract. Now, some of you might be like, can't we just subtract 1,000? Yes, but sometimes you're going to change your payment up. So that's why you want a payment column, so that I can just have it grab the payment. And if you compare that balance to your balance on your paper, it should match. Now, the beauty of this is, if I touch this cell, the actual, I refer to it as syntax. Do you see how the syntax is there? Okay, so it knows to grab that syntax for every cell you tell it to grab it for. So I'm going to take the cursor guy, put him in the bottom right-hand corner of the cell, and drag it. You should be able to randomly check. Look at your paper really quickly. At the end of the 5th week, it should match that balance on your spreadsheet of 2458.86. Got it? A little louder. So if you notice, that's why the reason we have this column is so I can tell it to grab that payment. So notice, see up here, I literally touched the cell. So I had it grab this times the interest rate minus B3. Now, one of the coolest parts to this is notice how the spreadsheet naturally picks up the pattern. So this right here says, oh, I'm going to reference C4. Or in this case, this is, I should say C6, sorry. So this is C7. So it's going to reference C6, multiply by the interest, subtract B7. See how it does that? Okay. Yeah, honestly, it's one of the more fascinating things I teach you probably all year, because you may not graph a rational function every day, but you could do this. So tell me this answer. Why does that read negative 910 as opposed to ours that said 89? Because you paid 1,000. So if my spreadsheet doesn't tell me what my final payment is, how could I use my spreadsheet to find my final payment? Yeah, if I went like this and said, hey, you know what? This plus this negative amount, isn't that my final payment? Do you see that right there? Does anyone need me to say that again? This final payment here in this cell comes from my basically overpaying the bank. So if you actually sent a check for $1,000, they'd send you a check back for $910.26, and they literally do that. Pardon? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay. Now, what else was on your spreadsheet from worksheet 8 that you just didn't feel very confident in? Principal and interest. That's right. So I'm going to teach you how to think of it. I'm going to show you one way to think of it today. I'll show you another way to think of it on Tuesday. For now, we're going to add it as a column at the end of our spreadsheet here. And then over the weekend, you have two things. One, you need to make sure worksheet 2 part 2 of your project is ready. It's just to be checked. But the other is go back into worksheet 8. I'm going to give you an answer key to that on Tuesday, and make sure that you've at least attempted this. Yeah. If I say right here, hey, out of this $1,000 payment, how much went towards paying off the principal? What does that even mean?
How much like the difference?
Yeah. So the balance was 5,000. The balance is now 4,600. The only amount that came off that balance was 400. Now I can type in that. Now I'm going to type it in. And I'm going to show you how to actually calculate it. But if I said, hey, out of $1,000, 400 of it went towards the principal. How much went towards the interest? Okay. Now, first of all, that should sound shocking. You made a $1,000 payment and not even half of it went towards the principal, right? Okay. So how would you tell me to calculate this by way of the spreadsheet? I would hit equals, and I would do C2 minus C3. That gives me my 400. Now, for the record, before you grab and drag down, how would you calculate this amount? What is the principal payment off the $1,000 after the second week? What would you do? 4,600 minus 4,152, right? You're going to get, what, 448, right? So simply by subtracting the previous balances, I can find out how much of each payment goes towards the principal balance. And you can tell it starts out very low, and this is true of a car, a house, a business loan, it doesn't matter. You hear this often, especially if you, depending on how much you find this interesting. When you drive a car off the lot, it drops in value, and your payments are mostly going towards that interest. So that happens in this case too. Let's talk about the interest column. You told me this was 600. Well, how do I tell the actual spreadsheet to calculate this? Okay, so I'm going to hit equals, and I'm going to do 1,000 minus, which is B3, minus 400, which is D3. I get my 600. Now, on your worksheet 8 and on your test next week, you will do a process like this by hand. So I just don't want you to miss what's happening, in the sense that this is coming from the subtraction of my balances to get my 400, and my 600 is coming from my payment minus whatever came off my principal. I'll talk a little bit different style, how to think about that on, actually on Tuesday, but I'm going to reference it right now, yeah.
Can we do this on a calculator?
Yeah, you can have your calculator, for sure.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yes, yeah. Now, I'm going to add this column just as a side comment, which will help you. The bank wants their interest first. So one other way that we'll talk more about on Tuesday to think about your actual payment distribution is this. Are you listening?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Grace backing up.
Sydney's on something other than this. Yeah. What do you think about what you wrote down in line 1? Didn't you take the 5,000 and do what with it immediately? Yeah. So the bank says, hey, what do you owe us? And what is our interest rate? Whoops. They're going to immediately charge you with that. Notice I forgot that asterisk right there, and it won't even read it. Now, it is not a coincidence that this is 5,600 and that is 5,000. Why? Because what did they give you, cause you to pay first? The interest. So watch this. If I were to click on this pattern and drag it down, what did the bank do to calculate your interest here? They said, what's your previous balance times the interest rate? Look at 51.52 and how much interest you paid. That's right. So we'll talk more about that on Tuesday. There are 2 things that I want you to do for homework. One is to make sure part 1 of your project is done. 2, at least attempt it. And then also, what should you go back in and double check? Worksheet 8. Thank you, people.
We'll check.
I agree.